Okay, so this video is going to be a quick recap of temperature regulation for Unit 2 of National 4 Biology in particular. So we have previously discussed this about how the body responds to changes in temperature, because the human body wants to be at around 37 degrees C, centigrade, Celsius, whichever you want to choose there. And that's for the advantage of enzyme function. It's the optimal temperature for human enzymes to work. So a core temperature of 37 degrees or close to that, very close to it, is necessary for effective human life. So our body goes through different temperatures even on a daily basis. I think it's currently winter in Scotland. You could be in a room temperature of around 20 degrees and then go outside and it's minus 15. It's quite a stark change. But even just little changes of a few degrees, your sensors, your nerves that are all around your body, in your skin, but also internally, will send a signal up to the brain, which will then tell the brain about the change in temperature. So it'll be like, oh, it's colder out here, or oh, it is suddenly too hot. Please do something about that so that we can continue to function. And the brain will then interpret the signals from the sensor nerves, and a particular part of the brain that deals with temperature regulation is called the hypothalamus. It will then send signals back down a different nerve chain to effectors, which would be nerves that control various things, such as muscles. And we'll discuss exactly how the body responds in a few ways to that. So this is an example of a feedback loop. Signal comes in from the sensors and out to the effectors. Another easy way to think of that would be like if you picked up something too hot. It's a slightly different circuit that deals with this, but it's the same idea. Signal goes to the brain and brain tells your body to do something. If this pen was literally red hot and I picked it up, the sensors in my fingertips would send the signal up to my brain. The brain would go, okay, that's too hot, let's deal with this. It sends a signal back down to the muscles in my fingers and it will go, ah! For added effect, making a noise as it happens. Okay, so that is the concept of the feedback loop, but what actually takes place if we have changes in temperature? So we're going to look simply just external temperature up and external temperature down. So let's go T for temperature, brackets, external. So our first signal is going to be an increase. So that would be, it's too hot. You've come out of an air-conditioned room and into a beautiful sunny day, or you've walked into a sauna and it is far too hot in there. Your body is telling you it is too hot. Sensors in your skin are picking up that signal and sending it to your brain, going, too hot. So what are some of the things the brain could do to cool that down? It sends the signal to the effectors, but it can't just send signals to effectors randomly. It needs to tell the effectors what to do. So if temperature's gone up, some examples that you might notice is you sweat. So sweat works on the basis that if you have the surface of the skin and you have water on that surface, this is a little drop of water. So your skin that's too hot, the water's come out there, it's your sweat. The idea isn't for sweat to pool up like it does in some areas of your body, like armpits, because that just creates a swampy mess. What you really want to happen there is for the water to evaporate. And the evaporation of that water takes some of the energy away from the skin and cools it down. And we're talking really tiny amounts per bead of sweat, but if you add that up across all of your body surface, it does get there. Interestingly enough, you can even sweat underwater. So if you go into a hot tub and it's too hot for you, your body's going to start responding by sweating. That's kind of gross. I kind of wish I hadn't said that now. So, blood is another thing that is controlled. Suddenly gone lowercase there. So blood is... There's a couple of things that are going to happen with blood actually. One of it is it's going to be directed to skin. So you can imagine someone who's getting too hot, they're going red. Not because they're sunburned, but because their blood is being taken up to their skin. And that's because the blood is carrying heat around the body. It's kind of like a radiator system. You've got hot water going through your radiators, and then that water is carrying the energy around the house. The radiators are sending the heat out from the water. The water's going back to the boiler, picking up more heat, coming back and radiating out. So how does that cool down the body? Well, the blood's carrying the heat around, it goes to the skin, radiates out of the body, blood goes back into the internal system and it's cooler, and it just keeps doing that until this feedback loop is satisfied that it's a cool enough temperature. So it goes to the skin to radiate heat. Another thing that happens in terms of the blood vessels is the blood vessels increase in size. I'm going to switch to the red here. So blood vessels, they go from smaller to larger. That may be over dramatic, it's not to scale, but basically if you can imagine heat emanating out of a blood vessel, you don't have a lot of surface area for the heat to come out here, whereas in the wider blood vessel you have much bigger surface area, so more heat can evaporate from that. Again, if you think of radiators, then they tend to have sort of waffly patterns. They're not just a square block of metal. Sometimes rings are interweaved, so that's to increase the surface area that can emanate that heat. So temperature goes up, sensors pick up the signal, take it to the brain. Brain says, we are too hot, let's deal with this. Sweat, blood, go to the skin. Blood vessels, get bigger, dilate. And then hopefully the sensors will begin to pick up that the temperature's cooler and the brain will stop sending those signals. So once we're at a suitable temperature, it'll be like, okay, don't need to sweat anymore. Stop sending that signal. Okay, blood, you can go back to your normal job. You don't need to be diverted to the skin. Blood vessels, go back to a regular size. So the brain is responding to this feedback and it's a constant loop. So that is if the external temperature increases, but we also want to deal with decreases. Just going to put a bubble around all this, just to separate it out from our decrease. So a decrease, we can see the opposite. We don't take sweat in. That is not physiologically possible. That just doesn't make sense. So let's look at the blood. The blood basically works in the opposite way. Blood is diverted away from the skin. Away from skin. So whereas before blood was going to the skin to get rid of heat, if an external temperature decrease is noticed by the sensors, the brain's going to tell the blood, okay, keep away from the skin, we want to keep that heat in the body. So we don't want to lose too much. That's why when you get cold, you begin to notice it in your fingertips and toes and your feet and hands, and sort of working its way up the limbs before your internal body really gets cold. And the blood vessels, well, we just see the opposite happening. They constrict, they go from really large, well, not really large, relatively large to relatively small. And it's just the opposite. It's so that heat isn't being lost from those blood vessels quite as much. Particularly the blood vessels near the skin, that's one of the ways it helps get diverted away. So that's what's happening with the blood. I want to talk about two other examples. If you get really cold, you start to shiver. So your sensors are picking up, it's cold, your brain's going, let's deal with that cold. It's sending to the effector muscles around your body to go like, let's make some movements, and just moving muscles around warms you up. That's why you see people out running in January wearing shorts and t-shirt. Their movement creates heat that is lost in the environment. But if your body is cold because of that environment, shivering will help generate heat to keep the temperature inside your body suitable for the enzymes to do their job. So it's not a very pleasant thing, and it's usually a signal to, okay, find some other way to warm up because this isn't working for us. Bit of an emergency response really is shivering. One other thing I'm going to make a note of is the hairs on your body. So temperature decreasing, hairs stand up. So let's take that as a little diagram. So again, we've got our surface of the skin. And our hairs are going to stand on end. So what you're effectively doing here is trapping a layer of skin around your, not a layer of skin, you have the layer of skin, you're trapping a layer of air around your body so that although the skin is emanating heat and heat is being lost in the environment, not as much of it is going to go way out into the environment because it's getting trapped by this hair. Your hair is forming a protective layer of air around the skin which holds in some heat. Humans, obviously, as far as land-dwelling mammals go, aren't the hairiest of creatures, but you can see this effect happen. There are other reasons hair stands on end. Competition, response to a threat. You know, imagine a cat seeing a dog, its hair stands on end to make it look bigger. But one of the reasons is sensors have picked up it's too cold, signal goes to the brain. Brain says, let's do something about that, sends a signal down to the effector muscles, little tiny muscles that cause this hair to stand on end. So there are some ways that this feedback loop of the sensor nerves and the effector nerves controlled by the brain respond to temperature to keep it regular at around 37 degrees. There are some behavioural responses as well. Build a fire, put on an extra jumper, fan yourself, whatever those may be. But these are some of the obvious, and I think the blood one's pretty cool, examples of how your body responds to heat. And we'll leave that there.